Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. In 1987, Jason Lee was known for his fierce loyalty. To protect his childhood sweetheart, Grace, from domestic violence, he took all the money from home and ran away with her. Because of that, I was targeted by the dead man's family for revenge. I was 5 months pregnant when they beat me until I miscarried. Then I was kidnapped by debt collectors, tortured in inhuman ways, and in the end I took my own life in despair. 20 years later, Jason Lee had become a billionaire. He returned to our hometown, proudly bringing Grace with him. Everyone envied their loving marriage, admiring them as a perfect couple. No one remembered me, the original wife who had died miserably. When I opened my eyes again, Jason was holding the battered Grace, rushing toward the hospital without even looking back at me. I turned away without hesitation. This time I would be the one to take all the family fortune, to build my own empire worth billions, and to return home in glory. Emily Lee. Jason snapped. How many times do I have to tell you? There's nothing between me and Grace. We grew up together like siblings. We wore the same open-crotch pants as kids. If there were really something between us, do you think it would have been your turn? Jason held Grace tightly in his arms, his eyes full of disappointment and reproach. Before I could say a word, Grace, loud and brash as always, interrupted. Emily, I know you're educated, so you probably don't understand how people like us are, but Jason and I are really just like brother and sister. Think about it. If there was something between us, why would I have married another man? Jason gave Grace an approving look, then turned to me with a sharp tone. Stop judging people with your filthy, pretentious way of thinking. Her husband's a bastard. He'd beat her like this. I'm taking her to the hospital. Give me $500 and later go to the market, buy an old hen, and make chicken soup for her. He spoke as if it were the most natural thing in the world, completely forgetting that in the 2 years we'd been married, he hadn't given me a single cent. All the money he earned went to treating his so-called brothers to drinks and dinners. When I didn't move, Grace struggled to get out of his arms, her eyes red. Jason, I'll go to the hospital myself. Don't fight with your wife because of me. A trace of pain flashed across Jason's usually cold face. Seeing that Grace was still trying to walk away, he bent down and lifted her up in his arms. Brothers are like limbs, he said firmly, and women are just clothes. Don't worry, Grace. No matter who I marry, my brothers will always come first. Then he turned to me again, his expression hard. Forget the soup if you don't want to make it. Just give me the $500. I stiffened, replying coldly, I don't have any money. Grace widened her eyes in exaggerated surprise. Come on, Emily. That's not right. Jason works so hard out there, risking his life every day on the streets, bleeding for every dollar. Don't tell me you haven't saved up even $500. If you act like this, how can you ever be a good sister-in-law to his brothers? At her words, a flicker of discomfort crossed Jason's face. He was about to say something to stop her, but I spoke first. If you're so concerned about saving money, maybe ask your dear Jason why he hasn't brought home a single penny since we got married. How am I supposed to save anything when there's nothing to save? Grace blurted out. But you have your own salary, don't you? I gave her a cold smile. Oh, so now you do remember that it's my salary. Grace froze, embarrassed, and buried her face in Jason's chest. Knowing he was in the wrong, Jason didn't dare say another word about the chicken soup. Holding Grace tightly, he turned and hurried off toward the hospital. I stood there feeling weak all over. My father sat quietly on the wooden bed, secretly relieved. Fortunately, this time around, I hadn't yet gotten pregnant with Jason Lee's child. Jason Lee and I were never from the same world to begin with. He was the boss of the most powerful street gang in the county with dozens of men under his command. I, on the other hand, came from a scholarly family, a well-behaved girl who had never been in a fight in her life. 3 years ago, a local thug leader set his sights on me. He harassed me endlessly, insisting I become his girlfriend. When I refused, he went so far as to kidnap me, intending to force himself on me. At that critical moment, it was Jason who happened to pass by and saved me. To defend my honor, he gathered his men and gave that thug the beating of his life. I had never met anyone like Jason Lee before. A street hero, fearless and unyielding. Despite my family's strong objections, I insisted on marrying him. this man from the underworld. I believed that once I married him, he would protect me from all the storms of life. But I never expected that after marrying Jason Lee, all the storms in my life would come because of him. Jason lived in a world of violence. Fights and revenge were everyday occurrences. Sometimes while walking on the street, I would get splashed with dirty water meant for him. Even sitting quietly at home, bricks would crash through the windows, and shattered glass would cut my arms and face. Still, Jason cared too much about saving face. Whenever one of his brothers ran into trouble, he would lend a hand no matter what. When his own money wasn't enough, he'd come to me for more. In my past life, I was foolishly in love. I used up all my dowry, everything my parents had given me to help Jason Lee support his so-called brothers. Within 2 years, every last penny of it was gone. When I thought of how much I had given and how little I got in return, only the hollow title of sister-in-law, I felt sick. What a joke. In the end, when Jason's enemies came after him for revenge, not a single one of those loyal brothers lifted a finger to help me. Later, I was thrown into an underground nightclub to pay off his debts. 2 of Jason's closest brothers, men who had once called me sister-in-law, joined others in humiliating me that night. I didn't want to live a single day longer after that. Thankfully, this time I still have a chance to make things right. I took a small ledger out of the chest. Written inside were all the amounts Jason Lee had taken from me over the 2 years we'd been married. Every last dollar had gone to helping his brothers. Every time he came for money, Jason swore that his brothers were men of loyalty and honor. They're just going through a rough patch, he'd said. Once they have money, they'll pay it all back. But in my previous life, when I was being hunted by debt collectors, beaten so badly that I lost the 5-month-old baby in my womb, I dragged my broken body from door to door trying to collect what they owed me. Not one of those so-called loyal brothers opened the door. Some set their dogs on me. Some pretended not to know me. Others took advantage of my weakness, touching me, laughing, saying vile things like, "If our dear sister-in-law spends one night with us, we'll pay her back. This lifetime I'd rather throw money into the river than let those bastards have it again." So, I took the ledger and went to collect the debts one by one. In this life, Jason Lee was still the powerful gang leader everyone feared. Every small-time thug in the county trembled at his name. When they saw me show up with the ledger, they grumbled under their breath, "Can't believe Jason's doing this," but still obediently paid back the money they owed. After 2 full days of running around, I finally recovered all my dowry money. 80% was returned. 20% was still missing. If I guessed correctly, Jason had probably lent that portion to Grace. Over the past few days, Jason Lee hadn't come home at all. But since he was such a big name in the county, I kept hearing stories about him and Grace every day. People said Jason Lee had personally escorted Grace back to her husband's house and beat the abusive man half to death. Others said Jason rented out an entire dance hall to celebrate Grace's birthday, even ordering a 2-tier cream cake from the city. She'd been the center of attention, the star of the night. But only I knew what that really meant. Jason Lee would soon be coming back to ask me for money again. So the day before he returned, I deposited every cent I'd collected into the bank in a fixed-term account. That night I finally slept soundly. Jason Lee came home carrying 2 takeout boxes of leftovers. "Emily," he said cheerfully, "you probably haven't eaten yet, right? I brought your favorites. Sticky rice chicken and steamed pork with rice flour." I cut him off before he could continue flattering me. "You remembered wrong. Sticky rice chicken and steamed pork are Grace's favorites. My mom always cared about healthy eating. I grew up on light food. My favorites are celery with lily bulbs and boiled shrimp." Jason froze for a moment, embarrassed. He awkwardly placed the takeout boxes on the table, rubbed his hands together, and forced a smile as he stepped closer. "Emily, do we still have any money at home? Grace got discharged from the hospital today. We took the guys out for dinner and dancing, but the restaurant and the dance hall are still waiting for payment. You know how it is. Her husband's a real piece of trash. He never gives her any money for living expenses. How's she supposed to pay for it?" I let out a cold laugh. If she doesn't have the money, then she shouldn't act like she does. And besides, she invited people to eat and dance. Why should I be the one paying for her? Jason's expression hardened. "I'm not asking you to pay for her. I'm saying we confront the money for now. Once Grace has cash, she'll pay us back. Without a word, I took out the ledger and handed it to him. Fine. As the saying goes, if you borrow and repay, you can borrow again. I'll give you the money, but tell Grace to pay back what she already owes me first. Jason took the ledger, flipping through the pages with growing confusion. His face darkened as he read. Grace said, "You're manipulative, and to think I used to defend you. I didn't realize you'd actually keep records, writing down every single cent you lent to my brothers." With a tearing sound, he ripped the ledger clean in half and threw it in my face. I didn't move, just stared straight at him. Go ahead and tear it. I've already copied that book several times over. And let me be clear, if Grace doesn't return the money within 3 days, I'll go to her husband myself and collect it. Jason's face twisted with anger. Enraged and humiliated, he raised his hand, ready to strike me. I met his glare coldly. "If you dare lay a finger on me, I'll report you to the police." He let out a mocking laugh. "Report me? Don't you know I've got brothers in the police station too?" I nodded calmly. "Of course I know. I don't expect them to arrest you. I just want to see you humiliated." Imagine the great Jason Lee, the big shot gang boss, being reported to the cops by his own wife. That's pretty funny, don't you think? For once, Jason had nothing to say. Furious, he swept everything off the table and slammed the door on his way out. This time I didn't bother cleaning up his mess. The house we lived in was rented anyway. I'd already decided I didn't want the man. Why would I still want this rundown place? But just as I was packing my things, Jason Lee stormed back in. Behind him stood Grace, wearing a brand new red dress, looking smug and triumphant, as if she had just caught me doing something shameful. The moment they entered, Jason grabbed the thermos from the table and smashed it to the ground. Scalding water and shards of glass sprayed everywhere, splattering onto my legs. My calves were instantly cut open in a dozen places, and boiling water burned a wide red patch on my arm. Jason froze, startled by what he'd done, and took a step toward me. But before he could reach me, Grace let out a sharp cry behind him. "Jason, my arm hurts." Without hesitation, Jason spun around, panic flashing across his face as he gently cradled Grace's arm. A small blister had formed on her smooth skin from a single splash of water, and his face immediately darkened with anger. He turned on me, eyes blazing. "Emily Lee, apologize to her." I clutched my burned arm, glaring at him through gritted teeth. "You were the one who threw the thermos. I didn't do anything. Why should I apologize?" Jason's face went cold, his voice sharp and full of accusation. "If you hadn't made such a fuss about Grace repaying that money, she and I wouldn't have come back here. If she hadn't come back, she wouldn't have gotten hurt. Our fight got Grace hurt. Shouldn't you be the one apologizing?" I looked at Grace with a half smile and asked, "So are you here today to pay me back?" Grace's face flushed. She looked awkwardly up at Jason. Jason's expression darkened. "What money? I'm the head of this household. I'll take responsibility for Grace's debt. She doesn't have to pay it back." I laughed at Jason's self-important words. "How dare you decide that for my daughter just because I'm your wife? Fine, then I don't want you as my husband." Fighting through the searing pain in my legs, I grabbed the divorce papers from the table and slapped them down in Jason's face. "Jason, let's get a divorce." The moment the word divorce left my mouth, shame and disbelief flashed across Jason's eyes. "Emily, what are you doing? I've treated you so well. Since we married, I've never so much as moved a finger against you. You argue with me once and you want a divorce." Grace, with her usual sickly sweet tone, chimed in to mediate. "Emily, don't be ungrateful. A guy like Jason, capable, family-oriented, and he doesn't hit his wife. Men like that are hard to find these days." I looked at Grace, baffled, and asked, "Is that really the bar you set for men? As long as he doesn't hit his wife, he's a good man? No wonder the men you pick keep getting worse." Grace's face flushed with anger. She turned to Jason and pouted, trying to play coy. "Jason, we're brothers. You just stood there while your wife publicly insulted me." Jason's face went ashen. He glared at me. "Emily, apologize to Grace." I folded my arms and stared at that couple, cold as ice. "Apologize? Fine. Tell me which thing I said was wrong. Not beating one's wife makes a good man? Men like Grace praises I can't afford. If you love him so much, why don't you just divorce your husband who hits you? You can have him. Then he can openly take care of you instead of sneaking around like this." With a sharp slap, Jason struck my face. I watched my pale cheek flush crimson, 5-finger marks blooming across it. He stood there, suddenly awkward. "Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just lost my temper." He urged me to hit him back. I touched my burning cheek and, giving a small laugh, raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. The force turned his head. Grace didn't bother pretending to be fragile. She lunged forward to strike me back, but I slapped her across the face in return. Grace screamed and rushed at me, only to be held back tightly by Jason. She raged at him. "Jason, let go. If you don't, I'll teach her a lesson for you. Women shouldn't be indulged. If you don't straighten her out now, next time she'll be trampling all over you." I stared at her, incredulous. How could a woman who had just been beaten into the hospital by her own husband now egg on other men to hit women? Grace still wanted to fight for Jason's honor, but Jason instead said, "Grace, forget it. Emily is a scholar and delicate. She's not like you, who used to climb walls and fight with boys. She's soft-skinned. I couldn't possibly hit her." Grace didn't expect him to say that. Grace's face flushed bright red, equal parts embarrassed and angry. I couldn't hold it in and let out a quiet laugh. For the past 2 years since marrying Jason Lee, Grace had always used the excuse of being his good brother to stay close to him. They spent more time together than Jason ever spent with me, his legal wife. Yet now, with Jason himself admitting that she was just a brother, why was Grace the one getting upset? Furious, Grace stormed out. But this time Jason didn't run after her. Instead, he acted like some picture-perfect husband. He grabbed a broom, swept up the broken shards of the thermos, and then, as if nothing had happened, said cheerfully, "Emily, come on. Let's go out. You've been wanting lamb hot pot for ages, right? Just you and me. No one else. I'll take you on my motorcycle." How laughable. When he'd first bought that brand new gelling motorcycle, I had shyly changed into his favorite light yellow dress, waiting for him to pick me up like one of those romantic scenes from a movie. The hero riding his bike through town with the woman he loved sitting behind him. But when he came home that day, there was already someone on the back seat. Grace, in a flaming red dress and lipstick to match, right in front of me. Grace clung arrogantly to Jason's waist, her expression full of smug pride. "Emily, don't get the wrong idea," she'd said carelessly, her voice dripping with false innocence. "Jason and I are just like brothers. We made a deal ages ago. When he finally bought a motorcycle, I'd be the first one to ride it. Hope you don't mind." I had nearly burst into tears that day, standing there humiliated while Jason laughed it off. And then, as if that weren't enough, he'd asked me to bring money so he could take his brothers out to celebrate his new bike with a lamb hot pot feast. I had gone to the restaurant, clutching the money, only to be stopped at the door by Grace herself. She shoved me back, smirking. "Emily, this is a brother's night, just a bunch of guys drinking together. No need for a woman like you to join in. Okay?" I had turned helplessly to Jason, hoping he'd speak up for me, but he'd simply nodded. "Grace is right. When these guys get rowdy, it gets crazy. Better if you don't get scared. Go home first." That night, I stood outside the restaurant, my stomach empty and my heart hollow, watching through the window as Jason, urged on by his cheering friends, clinked glasses with Grace, their lips brushing in a so-called brotherly toast. I couldn't for the life of me understand what kind of brotherhood this was supposed to be. So tender, so intimate, so shamelessly blurred. In this life, I finally understood it was never some noble bond between brothers. It was just a married woman seducing another woman's husband under the guise of loyalty. My thoughts drifted back to the present. Jason was still going on, insisting on taking me out for lamb hot pot. "Come on, Emily. Get on the bike already." I gave him a sarcastic smile. "Jason, maybe you should open your eyes and look at me. I'm covered in injuries. What I need right now is to get to the clinic and have my wounds treated. Besides, lamb is an inflammatory food. Injured people shouldn't eat it." Jason froze for a second, scratching his head awkwardly. "I didn't know." I cut him off coldly. "You did know. Remember when Grace got hurt in that fight at the dance hall? You specifically told me to cook for her. You even reminded me not to make beef or lamb because her cuts from the glass could get infected. But now when it's me who's hurt, you suddenly forget. Jason went silent. After a long pause, I climbed onto the back of his motorcycle. Anyway, my body was my own. I wouldn't ruin my health just because of two vile people like them. When we got to the clinic, the doctor was applying medicine to my burns when Grace's younger brother, Greg, suddenly burst through the door, panting. Jason, something's wrong. My sister's gone crazy at the arcade. The Phylon gangs got her. They said they were going to chop off one of her arms. Jason jolted up, ran a few steps out the door, then remembered I was still being treated and came back, turning to me and saying, "Emily, you stay here and finish dressing those wounds. After I settle things over with Grace, I'll come get you." With that, he didn't hesitate and followed Grace's brother, Greg, straight for the arcade. I knew he wouldn't be coming back, and Grace's other brother wouldn't allow him to either. After my wounds were bandaged, I hobbled back to our rented room and began thinking about the road ahead. Jason would never agree to a divorce. That much was certain, but it didn't matter. I had ways to force him to agree. Thinking of Grace and her husband, it was as bloated and useless as the one from my previous life. I dug through my memories from that past life and found Grace's husband, Wang Jiu. To my surprise, Wang Jiu looked gentle and literate, not the kind of brutal, abusive monster I had imagined. After we sat and talked for a while, I learned the truth about why Grace had been beaten that time. It wasn't only because she danced closely with Jason in the club. Grace was shameless. She clung to other men, and she'd been pursuing my husband because Jason hadn't yet been with her. I heard Wang Jiu boast to people at the club that among the handsome men in Jason's gang, he'd been with every one of them except Jason. He even confessed that he'd passed some nasty disease to me. Wang Jiu wept in pain and despair, and I was stunned. "So what are you going to do now?" I asked. Wang Jiu said fiercely, "Of course I'm getting a divorce, but I won't let that off easy. My family gave 600 yuan as a bride price when we married. Every cent of it must be returned." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. No wonder in my past life, Grace had insisted on borrowing 600 yuan from Jason. Thinking of the hungry, admiring look in Grace's eyes when she looked at Jason, a plan formed in my mind. "Wang Jiu, help me with two things. I can get you and Grace divorced, and I can make sure you get your 600 back." That evening, I specially cooked a big meal and had someone summon Jason home to eat. Jason, thinking I'd finally given in and softened, praised me warmly. "This is more like the image of a proper sister-in-law." I suppressed a bitter smile and deliberately steered the conversation toward Grace. "I've thought it through. Grace causes trouble all the time because her marriage is unhappy. She doesn't want to go home. I heard she wants a divorce, but your family insists that she return the 600 bride price before they'll agree to a divorce." Jason frowned. 600? That's a lot. I nodded and suggested gently, "Grace is your childhood friend. Can you really stand by and watch her suffer in an unhappy marriage? Why don't we sell your motorcycle? Use 600 of the proceeds to let Grace get her divorce, and the rest can help with household expenses." When I suggested selling the bike, Jason hesitated. "If we don't have enough, I can borrow more. Check how much is left at home and we'll pull it." He added, "But don't sell the bike. I need it every day." I guessed he wouldn't want to part with the motorcycle. I stood up and opened the door, and Grace, who'd been standing outside, eavesdropping with red-rimmed eyes, walked in. "Jason," she pleaded, "you said you'd go through fire and knives for your brothers. You can buy a new bike later. If I don't get divorced from Wang Xiu, he'll beat me to death sooner or later. Jason, we're brothers. Please sell the bike and help me end this marriage." Jason cared most about face in front of his men. Faced with Grace's moral blackmail, he gritted his teeth and painfully agreed to sell the motorcycle. After the bike was sold and the bride price returned, Wang Xiu rushed through the divorce paperwork with Grace. I, for my part, took care of every detail. I told Jason Lee that he should spend more time with Grace for the next few days. Hearing that, Jason looked completely stunned, a flicker of unease flashing across his face. "Emily," he asked carefully, "with Grace clinging to me like this, you're not mad?" I smiled gracefully, gentle and composed. I was too narrow-minded before. I shouldn't have been jealous over nothing. I know you only see Grace as a sister. Besides, you're right. As the big sister-in-law, I should be more understanding and broad-minded. Jason looked relieved, even proud, praising me for being sensible. Then, without another word, he hurried out to comfort his so-called brother. With my careful encouragement, the entire Irang gang soon heard about how the righteous Jason Lee had sold his beloved motorcycle to help his brother Grace escape an unhappy marriage. A man who loved the spotlight like Jason would never miss a chance to be admired and worshipped by his gang. That night, Jason rented out an entire dance hall to celebrate Grace's freedom, her official return to single life. I knew exactly what that meant. Grace wouldn't waste such a perfect opportunity. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Wang Jigu. "Jason's drunk," he said coldly. Grace took him to a hotel. Pretending to sound worried, I gathered a few of Jason's relatives and went straight to the hotel. When we opened the door, the scene inside was exactly as I expected. The two of them tangled together, clothes ripped and scattered all over the floor. Jason's father was the first to react, kicking Jason hard in the ribs. My mother-in-law screamed and rushed forward, slapping Grace twice across the face with a loud crack. In my previous life, I had always wondered why Jason and Grace, who had grown up together as neighbors and childhood sweethearts, had my mother-in-law been so firmly against him marrying her? Now it finally made sense. She must have already known what kind of woman Grace really was, sleeping around tangled up with men outside. She didn't want her son wearing a green hat, which was why she'd chosen me, the well-behaved, educated girl. Jason, jolted awake by the pain and the chaos, finally spotted me standing among the crowd. Panic flashed across his face. "Emily, listen to me. It's not what it looks like." I stared at him coldly. "Jason Lee, let's get divorced. You know, I have a thing about cleanliness. I don't want a filthy man." In the end, Jason still cared about his reputation. He agreed to the divorce. We had been married for 2 years, living in a rented apartment. He had barely contributed a cent. The household expenses and even the support for his parents had always been covered by me using what was left of my dowry. Jason knew he was in the wrong. So, when we divorced, he insisted I take the money left from selling his motorcycle. I didn't refuse. It was mine to begin with. After the divorce, I quit my job as a substitute teacher. With only 5,000 yuan to my name, I headed south to start a small trading business. Riding the wave of the times, I opened chain stores across more than a dozen cities, selling all kinds of small goods. Pretty hair ties, accessories, earrings, rings, shoes, hats, socks. Business boomed and money poured in faster than I could count. That same year, a massive flood struck the provincial capital. Watching the young soldiers wade through the filthy waters for days, their feet covered in wounds, I couldn't bear it. I sent all the cotton socks and slippers from my warehouse straight to the flood relief front lines. To my surprise, the officer in charge of receiving the donation was none other than my old classmate, Daniel Fu. He smiled in disbelief. "Emily, the class genius running a business now. And you, Daniel Fu, the aspiring scientist, when did you join the army?" We both laughed as if we were back in those carefree school days again. After that reunion, I officially joined the volunteer rescue team for flood relief. During my years of running shops in the capital, I had built up a wide network of contacts and influence. Under my call to action, countless kind-hearted business owners joined the flood relief effort. When the soldiers grew hungry, the merchants brought them steaming bowls of spicy soup, fried dough, tea, eggs, and meat buns. When the soldiers were tired, tents were set up right on the embankment so they no longer had to sleep on the cold, damp grass. A few days later, the floodwaters finally receded. During the farewell ceremony for the troops, a few of the girls from my store mischievously pushed me into Daniel Fu's arms. Someone in the crowd laughed and shouted, "Deputy Commander, we can't repay you for saving our lives, so we're giving you a wife. Do you want her?" Daniel's face turned bright red, but he yelled back, "Yes." 3 months later, Daniel Fu and I got our marriage certificate. After the wedding, I didn't follow him to the military base but stayed in the provincial capital to keep building my business. Daniel handed over all the savings he'd been putting away for years, more than 30,000 yuan, and told me to use it to expand. With that money, plus what I'd saved from my stores, I bought a plot of land in the suburbs and opened the first wholesale market for small goods in the entire provincial capital. I divided the property into over 100 stalls and prioritized renting them to military families who were struggling financially. When the market opened, business boomed. Because my project had created so many jobs for the families of soldiers, the Army awarded me a certificate of honor as a model military spouse. The thriving wholesale market also revived the surrounding economy. Many laid-off workers found new ways to earn a living, hauling goods for shop owners or peddling tricycles around the area, successfully rebuilding their lives. But what I never expected was that I would one day see Jason Lee, my ex-husband, there. He looked far older than his actual age. His left arm was gone, amputated at the shoulder. With one hand gripping the handlebar of a battered old tricycle, he went from store to store offering delivery services. "Boss, need something delivered? Cap rate $1 less per load," he called, trying to sound cheerful. When he saw me walking over with a ring of keys in hand, collecting rent from the vendors, his eyes went wide. Panic flashed across his face. He ducked his head, turned his handlebars sharply, and pedaled away as fast as he could. Later, I learned what had happened to him. He'd lost his arm years ago in a fight at a nightclub, trying to defend Grace. After Jason and I divorced, Grace had wasted no time trying to take my place. But Jason never intended to marry her. They were from the same circle. Everyone knew each other's business. And Jason, once the boss of their gang, knew full well that Grace had slept with many men in their group. A woman like that could be a brother maybe, but never a wife. After Jason repeatedly refused to marry her, Grace threw herself at him again and again until she realized he truly wouldn't give in. Then she went right back to her old ways, drinking, causing scenes at nightclubs and arcades, stirring up trouble everywhere. Jason always ended up cleaning up her messes until one day a fight left him without an arm. Not long after, the provincial capital launched a major anti-crime crackdown. The nightclubs were shut down, the gangs dissolved, and Jason suddenly had no way to make a living. With his arm gone and no income, he eventually agreed reluctantly to marry Grace, mostly because he needed someone to look after him. After marriage, Jason stayed the same as ever, generous to a fault. Whenever a brother was in trouble, he'd lend money. If one couldn't afford food, he'd bring them home and feed them. Before long, all their money was gone. When they ran out, Jason borrowed from others or secretly sold Grace's clothes and jewelry. Every time someone praised him with, "Jason, you're such a loyal guy," he'd feel so proud that he'd give away even more, emptying his house and wallet again and again. Once or twice might have been forgivable, but eventually even Grace had enough. After yet another shouting match, she still couldn't change her ways. A dog can't stop eating filth, and all she could think about was how to get her next good meal. She couldn't resist the temptation to buy pretty clothes anymore, and ended up selling drinks at the karaoke bar to make money. One night, while she was entertaining customers again, Grace was caught red-handed by Jason. The couple caused a scene at a late-night food stall, and only then did Jason finally understand why Grace's ex-husband had been so abusive. Jason wanted to hit his wife, but Grace had already hooked up with a new big shot from the nightlife scene. At the boss's order, his underlings swarmed in and beat Jason half to death. Jason divorced again, and this time he lost an arm. With no job, no one wanted to introduce him to anyone anymore. Years later, Daniel and I, with our 1-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, went back home to pay respects to our ancestors and heard the news. Jason was dead. They said after getting drunk, he suddenly went mad, shouting that he was a billionaire, and went to the karaoke bar to look for Grace. She tore into him with scorn and mockery. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a fruit knife from the coffee table and stabbed Grace 18 times, killing her on the spot. Jason was later sentenced to death. When they heard I'd come back, Jason's parents had someone deliver a crumpled envelope to me, saying it was a letter he'd written to me before he died. Daniel looked at the envelope with green-eyed jealousy and asked, "Do you want to open it?" I shook my head and casually tossed the envelope into the fire pit.